Hey, welcome back, and in this video I'm going to talk about ESBuild, which is a super fast bundler written in the Go language. Now, not only is it a super fast bundler, it can actually transpile from TypeScript to JavaScript. Now, why am I specifically going to talk about it? Well, if you remember my tech trend video from December 2021, and I was talking about the trends of 22, one of the things I was saying is that we're going to move into this hybrid world where languages such as Rust and Go start to interop with the JavaScript ecosystem. And in fact, we're already seeing that in the tool space where slowly but surely those native JavaScript tools that we had, things like Webpack, etc., are being replaced with faster alternatives written in languages such as Go or Rust. And ESBuild is a perfect example there. It runs at a blindingly fast speed, as we're going to see. And in this video, I'm going to show you how you can quickly get started with ESBuild. We'll do some basic translation from TypeScript to JavaScript. We'll also create a React application and then use ESBuild to bundle that up and send it across to the browser. And again, we'll look at all the things like minification and source maps, etc. But not only that, I'm going to show you how you can even use ESBuild in your developer workflow to do things like hot reloads, etc., and take advantages of that super fast compilation that you get over TypeScript compiler. All right, with that in mind, let's get started. Alright, so the first thing to do is I want to just very quickly create a little node application. So what I'm going to do is just type in npm init, and that will create me a little package.json. So we'll just clear that now. So if you look at my directory, we can see we've got a package.json here. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to install ESBuild. To do that, ESBuild is installed via Node Package Manager, npm. So I can just type in npm install ESBuild, and I'm going to save that as a dev dependency. So that'll install for a second, and as you can see, ESBuild is now installed. If I want to check that ESBuild is working okay, I can access it via the bin folder in the node modules directory. So if we just type in node modules.bin, and then I can type in ESBuild -- version, and then it should come back with a version. And you can see I'm running 0.14.13. Of course, if you had installed ESBuild globally, then you wouldn't need to do node modules.bin. You could just type in ESBuild. So now that we have ESBuild installed, I think the first thing we want to do is write a little bit of code, and then we can just see some of that transpilation in action and see how it works. So I'm just going to open up on my machine Visual Studio Code. So I'm just going to type in code dot, and what we will do is we'll create a new file and we'll call it chris.ts. So as you can gather, I am using a TypeScript file. The reason I'm using a TypeScript file is I want to show you that ability to transpile from TypeScript to JavaScript. You can, of course, use ESBuild without TypeScript, but I think it's a pretty good demonstration. And again, TypeScript's one of those things, again, super hot in 2022. And of course, TypeScript gives you a lot of benefits, especially on type checking, etc., and Visual Studio Code debugging, etc. So it really is worthwhile looking into TypeScript if you've not done that already. So we're going to type a little bit of code. So all this code is going to do is going to echo out a string that you pass in. So I'm going to put a comment in here, just so that we can see that comment's going to come back as part of the transpilation. I'm going to use ES 2015 format. The reason I'm going to use that sort of ES6 plus format rather than ES5 and below is one of the things about ESBuild is it doesn't support all the JavaScript. It's not like Babel where you really can do transpilation to older versions to ES5. They are working on that capability, but actually it really is expecting things on an ES 2015 plus format, and more specifically it's expecting you to use ES modules rather than CommonJS format. So it's just something to be aware of when using ESBuild. So with that in mind, I'm going to create our echo function. So we will create a function, we'll call that echo, and what we are going to do is we are going to have a parameter called text, and we're going to use a type, and in this case we're going to say that the type is of type string. And of course, we're going to use an arrow function to declare our little function here. So what we'll do now is take in that parameter text, and then we'll essentially concatenate it to the word hello. So it says hello Chris, hello Fred, or whatever you pass in. So we will just type in let result equals hello, and then $text, and then that will do here. And then we'll just log it out to the console for just now. So log it. And we'll type in console.log and what our result is. So if we just run that here for a second, and then the last thing that we're going to do here is we will just echo out a result there. So let's just save that, and that is our simplest little TypeScript application. Okay, so now that we've got our application, we'll jump back to the terminal and then we'll transpile that. So let's come back to our terminal, and what we're going to do is use ESBuild. Again, remember it's in our node modules folder in the .bin, and we'll type in ESBuild, and then we're going to put in the name of the TypeScript file that we want to transpile. So in this case, it's going to be chris.ts, and then we need to specify the name of the file that we want to output to that. Now, of course, in bundling, we can use an output directory, and we'll show that a bit later, but this is a simple example. All I'm going to do is take an incoming TypeScript file and output it to JavaScript. So the name of the out file that we're going to have is going to be called chris.js. So if I type in chris.js, and you can see it's created that chris.js, and it's done it in 97, it's a size of 97 bytes, and it's done in 7 milliseconds. That is ridiculously fast, super fast. And we can do it again, right? We can, 3 milliseconds, so a little bit faster there, but but that first time, 7 milliseconds. So it's super, super fast. And we can just have a look at what that looks like. So if I do a more.chris.js, and you can see there, it's pretty much kept. Actually, let's go bring that into Visual Studio Code for a second. The first thing I want to notice there in TypeScript is I've got my type there, which is a string, and of course that isn't supported in JavaScript, right? The declaration of types is a TypeScript feature, not a JavaScript feature. So when that gets transpiled, that of course has got to go. So let's have a look at the chris.js, and as you can see, I've got my echo function, but that type declaration is gone. The other thing you can see there, it's actually used the double quote format. So in my previous version, I had a echo thread in single quotes, but actually ESBuild has decided to convert that into double quote formats for consistency's sake. So again, it's going to tidy up your code, prettify it a little bit as well. So there we go. We have our JavaScript file, and if I come back to the terminal for a second, then if I wanted to, I could type in node chris.js, and you see it works. It comes back with hello Fred. So actually, if we wanted to, we can compare that to TypeScript in its compilation time. So if you haven't got TypeScript installed already, you can do an npm install, and you could do it globally in this case, TypeScript, and then if you run that for a second, it will install TypeScript, and then I can access the TypeScript compiler by typing in TSC, so which is obviously stands for TypeScript compiler. So let's clear that. So if I want to take that chris.ts and then compile it down to chris.js, I can do that with the TypeScript compiler. So let's remove the chris.js for a second, and we'll use TypeScript this time. So I will do TSC, so TypeScript compiler, chris.ts, and then we need to specify a target. So in this case, I want the target to be ES6. So, because I'm trying to replicate the conditions that ESBuild has. Remember, ESBuild doesn't transpile down to ES5 and below, or rather it's experimental. I'm sure they'll do it fully at some point. Whereas TypeScript does have that ability. It can do ES5, ES3, etc. So that's something to be aware of. If you do need that ability to transpile between different versions, then ESBuild is probably not going to work out for that particular area, and you might go back to a Babel or a TypeScript compiler for the transpilation piece. But if you are writing pure ES6 plus beyond, then use ESBuild. So I'll specify my target as ES6, and then in this particular case, I need to specify an out file. So we'll say the out file is chris.js, as we did before, and we'll run that. It'll take a second. Comes back with a load of errors. I'm not going to go into the reasons on that why, but you can see it's generated the chris.js. And if we do a more.chris.js, you can see it's generated a pretty equivalent file to what we had before. In fact, if I was to come back into VS Code, look at the JS file, you can see actually the difference with the TypeScript compiler. It's not doing anything with that echo. It's leaving you with the single quotes as you had before. But same thing. It's removed the TypeScript type declaration as part of my parameters. And of course, if I wanted to generate an ES5 file with TypeScript, I could do that. So if I just type in ES5, and as you see, it comes up there. And then if we come back into VS Code for a second, and then if we look at the generated file, you can see it's taken that arrow function, got rid of that, and turned this back into a kind of function declaration. So again, it's just something to be aware of, difference of compilations. So where is the advantage of ES-Build over TypeScript, though, for that sort of transpilation? And again, we'll get into that a little bit later for the hot reloading scenario, because that's going to be super cool. But you'll be able to see it if we time it. So if I do a time TSC, chris.ts -- target ES6 -- out file chris.js. Run that for a second, and then you can see the difference, right? It's taking like 3 seconds to do the compilation. So if we compare that to the ES-Build compilation time there, you can see that did that 3 milliseconds. So ES-Build is running at a faster speed, right? It is super fast. So again, I think that's something to be aware of in that hot reload section when we do that a little bit later. That's one of the reasons that you may want to use ES-Build in those scenarios over TypeScript compilation. But of course, for production, you could stick with TypeScript compilation and switch between the two. But we'll cover that a little bit later in this video. Alrighty, so we've seen some of the transpilation capabilities of ES-Build. Let's have a look at some of the bundling capabilities. And this is the main reason we're going to be using ES-Build kind of going forward, is that great bundling features, which is kind of equivalent to what Webpack does, but of course it does it super fast. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to bundle a React application. So so what we're going to have to do is create a React application in the first place. So what we're going to do here is we're going to install some of the things we're going to need. So we're going to need React, and we're going to need React DOM installed. So we'll just do an npm install. So we'll install React, we'll install React DOM. One of the things that I think you should do, whether you are using TypeScript or not, it's something to get into the habit of, is actually you might as well install the type files for any packages that you're installed. So you can see that I'm installing React, but I'm also installing Types React as well. The reason it's a good habit to get into, not just for TypeScript, but also for JavaScript, is it's going to help you in something like VS Code for and linting, etc., for having all of your types being recognized. It's going to do a better job, it's going to give you better IntelliSense, and it's going to come up with less errors. So I think that's a super great habit to get into. So we'll type in types React DOM as well. And we'll install that on the machine. So we'll run that for a second. Okay, so that's now installed, and what we'll do now is we'll go and create that React application. So to do that, I'm going to go back into VS Code. So I think first thing we'll do, we'll just get rid of these 2 files that we created earlier. I don't think we need them anymore. So we're going to create ourselves a little source folder, and that's just going to help us tidy our code up a little bit. And then I'm going to create ourselves an app.tsx. So a TSX is equivalent to a JSX. It's just that the TSX obviously stands for TypeScript. So just be a little bit aware of that. So rather than JSX files as you would normally do in React, you would do a TSX if you are writing things in TypeScript. So I'm creating my TSX file. First thing we'll do is we'll import React. So we'll stick with the ES modules format. So we'll do an import star as React from React. And then we obviously need to install our React server as well. So we'll do that. So React DOM server. Okay, so that's our imports. We will create a new hello component. So let hello equals, and we'll use arrow function syntax. So it'll be h1, and we'll just say something like hello world. So that is our hello component. And before we go and actually put it down to the browser and stuff like that, I just want to log it out and show you ESBuild working, and then we will finish up our application from there. So we'll do a console.log, and we'll do a server.render to string, and then we'll do hello. And that is our component. And again, if you think about this for a second, and again, this is one of the reasons I'm showing you this, is that is the basis of server-side rendering, right? This is the type of code you'd be writing if you want to start doing things like server-side rendering. So this is one of the real reasons I'm actually trying to show you ESBuild just now, because one of our future videos, I'm going to be covering React server components, and I'm going to be covering React 18, and I'm going to want to use ESBuild to do my server-side rendering rather than Webpack. So again, look forward to that in a future video, but you can kind of see that working. And if you were wanting to create your own server-side renderer, then again, ESBuild is a really good tool to be able to do that rather than using Webpack. So anyway, I've created my render to string there. So if we come back to the terminal for a second, so what we're going to do now is we're going to take the React application that we built, and we're going to bundle it up ready to be displayed. So in this case, we will need to access ESBuild, which is in our node modules folder. Of course, that's the folder above because we're in our source folder just now. So we'll type in node modules .bin ESBuild, and it's we need to pass in the name of the file that we want to bundle up. So in this case, it's the app.tsx. We're going to want it to create a bundle, so we will type in -- bundle, and what it's going to do there is take our React library, and it's going to take our React DOM server library as well, and then basically pull them and bring them into the bundle. I'll show you what that looks like in a second. And we need to specify the name of the file that we want to bundle it to. So in this case, I'll just call it out.jas for just now. You can also output it to a directory, and I'll show you how that works in a minute. So if I just run that for a second, and you can see it's ran this in 18 milliseconds, super fast, right? And it's created me a 200k bundle there called out.js. So if I more out.js, and you can see it's got a whole load of stuff there that I never created, and you can imagine that is going to be our React library. So if I come back to VS Code, and you can see out.js is in there. And actually, if I scroll down to the very bottom, very bottom, what you're going to see is there is the code that we created earlier. There's my hello, here's my console.log, etc. So, and of course, as you saw below there, all of the kind of libraries that we had, which was the React library and the React DOM server library, that has all been bundled up as well. So last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to the terminal. Let's just clear this for a second. And of course, if I wanted to, I could execute that out.js. So if I type in node out.js, and you can see it's generated h1 data, React root, and hello world. And essentially what that's done there is it's called React render to string, and then it's generated out the HTML that I need that's going to be displayed on the browser. So it's taken it from the TSX format or JSX format, and then it's put it into a sort of standardized HTML format. So as you can see, that was pretty cool stuff, and is actually the basics and foundation for server-side rendering. So if you were wanting to build a server-side renderer, then being able to use React DOM server, being able to use a render to string, which of course changes in React 18, and again we'll cover that in our React 18 videos. But if you want to build a server-side render, you can see it's pretty simple, and this is the sort of basics of being able to do that, and ESBuild would be a great tool to do that. But what we're going to do is build a regular React client-side application without server-side rendering and build that in the normal way. So what we'll do is we'll just get rid of all of this, and then we will create a React application again. So I'm just going to do an import React from React, and then we'll do an import React DOM from React DOM. And then what we'll do is we will create our app as we did before. So do a const app equals, and we'll do another arrow function in here. And actually, I'm just going to return a div, and we'll say hello ES build world. There we go. And we'll just, that's really our app. And then we will do a react DOM.render, and we'll pass in our app. And then all we need to do is pass forward our document.getElementID, and we need to put in root. Because remember, what we're going to do is we're going to render that app component that we've just built over here into that root. So now that we've got that created for our app, next thing I want to do is we need an HTML file to create that in. So what we are going to do is we're just going to create a folder, and we'll call it public for just now, where we're going to put our public files. And then I will create a file called index.html. And then what we will do is just very quickly create our HTML file. So we will set the dot type to be an HTML. Of course, we need our HTML tag there. So we've got our HTML tag. We'll put a quick head in here as well. And we'll put the usual kind of meta char set equals UTF -8, and then we'll give it a quick title. So we'll say ES build and react bundles. Okay, so that is our head, and then I need to give ourselves a body. So we'll just put body, and we need to create our root tag, if you remember, that we were looking for before. So we'll just put that in here. So if I were to come back to the app.tsx file, if you remember here, when we do our React DOM render, we're going to put our app in there, and what we're going to do is look for the document element ID root. So that's where it's going to be putting that. So of course we need a root div tag there, which we have now got. And then the last thing we need to do is execute the script that our ES bundle is going to generate. So in this case, I am going to create something called we'll put it into a dist folder, because I want to create a folder off the back of this. So we'll just put dist app.js, and then we'll just end our script. So basically, we've got our HTML file, and what we're going to look to do now is generate our bundle and put it in a dist folder in this public area here. That is essentially what we're going to do, and then we'll serve up our HTML file, and then we'll be able to see our React application working. Alright, so far the method we've used to bundle up our application has been used in the command line, but there's actually a second method that we can use to bundle up our application using ESBuild, and that is through using a straight Node.js file. So let me show you how that works. And what we're going to do now is we're going to create a new file, and we will call it browser builder. I'll do this as a JS file rather than a TS file, because we're just doing a build at the moment. And so what we will do here is I'll use CommonJS format. So we're going to require ES build, and we're going to call the build sync method on that, and then we'll just pass through some options. And what that allows us to do is specify some of those things. So those command line parameters for ESBuild can get a little bit large, or maybe you want to do something interesting in the build system. So maybe you want something to be kind of code operated. Well, it just gives you a different way of doing that. So that's the kind of reason you can do that, and we can just pass in what we need. So in this case, we would pass in entry points, and we would set that to the name of the files that we want to build. So in this case, I want to build my app.tsx file, or bundle my app.tsx file. So that is going to be the file we're going to bundle there. I can tell it that I want to bundle or not. So there's a little attribute called bundle, and I can set that to true or false. So if I don't want to do any bundling, I can leave that to false. But of course, I am going to want to bundle. So I will just put that to true. And this is where, again, it kind of gets useful. You can also minify. So ESBuild supports the ability to minify. We won't minify just yet, but we will do that in a second. And then It also supports the ability to create source maps, etc. So if I put source map there, then that's going to allow me, especially with minification, to have my developer tools all working and sync up my code. So that's going to be super useful. And then, of course, you can set your target for browsers, etc., which is, of course, what you need to do when you're doing sort of browser bundling. So in this case, I'm going to set that to Chrome 58. I'm going to also support Firefox 57. I will also support Safari 11. And I will support Edge 16. Okay, so this is me setting myself up for browser bundling. And then the last thing is, as I said before, rather than using an out file, which I could do, I'm going to use an out directory. So in this case, I'm going to set that to my public folder, and I want it to go into that dist folder in here. So I want to create a dist folder within public, and that's where I want that bundle to go. So I'm just going to save that. And now if I go back to the terminal, and then if I type in node browser builder.jas and we run that, and then let's just come back into VS Code for a second. And you can see it's created that dist folder there, and I've got my app.js and I've got my source mappings created. So I'm looking I'm looking pretty good at the moment, right? So I've got that nice and bundled there. It's everything that you would expect. If I go to the very bottom there, you can see my React DOM render. You can see that hello world for React that I just created. So now that that's kind of working, what we're going to do is we're just going to fire that up in the browser, and then we'll modify a couple of these settings and see what that looks like. But the first thing is I just want to show that working. So if I just come back to my terminal for a second, and what I'm going to do here is, if you remember, I've got this public folder here. There's a very cool npm package called HTTP server, and it's a zero config web server. So I can literally type in npx HTTP server, and it will fire up a very small web server, and then it will serve up whatever's in that public folder. So if I run npx HTTP server, it'll take a second, and you can see it started up this HTTP server. So I'm just going to go into Brave for a second. I'm going to create myself a private window so that none of the caching or anything like that kicks in. I'll just paste it in 127.80.80, and you can see there is my hello ES build world. And if I look at developer tools for a second, you see it's got all the React tools, all the source map and stuff is part of that. And if we have a look at the network, actually let's just do a refresh there. There's our original call. Here's our HTML file that we created with the distapp.jas, and there is that bundle that we created earlier. So that is pretty cool stuff. So as I said before, there's other options that you've got within there. So if we just close that down a second, and we just bring back up VS Code. If I come back into that browser builder for a second, as you see, we've done the bundling, but if I wanted to switch off bundling, I could. I mean, it'll break my application. But if we come back to the terminal, and then we just run our node browser builder.jas, come back into VS Code, and then if I just open up that dist folder and we look at the app.js file, you can see it's got rid of the bundling, and it's just doing the import statements there. So if you don't want to bundle, you don't have to. So let's just put bundling back on again. And again, it's similar for the source map. If I don't want to generate that source map, I can just set that to false. I can delete that source map from here, and then I can run my code again, and then as you will see there, the source map is not generated, and I've just got the app.js. But of course I want to generate my source map, so I will just run that again, and you can see my source map is back. So that's pretty cool stuff. The last thing that you probably want to be aware of is, of course, if I want to minify, then I can just put minify equals true, come back into my terminal, run that again, and then if we come back into this folder, you can see it's all been minimized. So ESBuild's got all the sort of same capabilities as you would expect Webpack to have. Now, the other sort of cool things that you can do as well, and I think this is super interesting stuff, is at the moment, what you're seeing is I'm using ESBuild to to perform the build. But actually ESBuild is really cool. It actually has a WebAssembly version as well. So if I wanted to, just as sort of prove a point, I could change that from ESBuild to ESBuild Wasm. So if I save that, and then if I then do an npm install ESBuild Wasm, and we'll just do a save on that. Take a couple of seconds to install, we'll clear that. But now if I run that node browser builder.js, it takes a little bit longer, right? But you can see it's generated the same stuff. And in fact, if I take the minification off for a second, we'll hit save. And now if I run node browser builder.js again, it will generate the WebAssembly version. And if I just have a look here, you can see it's got rid of the minification. And you can probably get the idea that because it's a WebAssembly module, it's going to run slower than the native Go application that's created. So you should try and use the native ESBuild rather than using the ESBuild Wasm. But there are scenarios where you might want to use it. So for example, I mean, this is the cool part. So if you wanted to bundle your applications and even do some transpilation, right, in a web browser, you could, right? And so that is really sort of interesting scenarios because it's a WebAssembly module. You can run it in a browser. If you wanted to have some sort of CI/CD pipeline where you're accepting other people's code and run it in a sandbox fashion and not necessarily run native files, then again, the ESBuild is a way of doing that, or the ESBuild Wasm version. So I think there's a few interesting scenarios that there's a WebAssembly module version, and maybe that's something we'll explore in a future video. But again, I think it's super cool functionality that you can kind of use there. Now, the other things that are supported, and I'm just going to bring up the ESBuild website for a second. So if I go to ESBuild, I'm not going to cover this just now, but one of the things I want you to kind of be aware of is that, like Webpack, ESBuild supports plugins as well. And again, there's some examples on the site that if you wanna go and load the plugins, but you can kind of see it's works in the exact same way as we just built with the browser build. So all you would do is put in plugins and then specify the name of the plugin there. So in this case, there's an example here of how to build a plugin, so you can go and do that. So I think that's really cool. So it's got that plugin functionality. We're not going to cover that today because there's quite a lot there, but there is also a marketplace as well, and a plugin is just another node package. So again, you can publish it to npm, and then you can use other people's plugins. But if you click on here, you'll see there's a whole other marketplace of plugins. So the sort of things that you would expect is things like Sass plugins, CSS modules, GraphQL plugins, ability to copy files, SVG plugins, so all the sort of plugins that you would be, or even WebAssembly plugins, so import WebAssembly files. So all the sort of plugins that you would expect you get from Webpack is there, and of course you can build your own plugins there. So maybe there's a couple of plugins that aren't there and you might need to build some, or wait till somebody else in the community builds one, then that's fine. But again, that whole plugin functionality exists in ESBuild, so I think it's a kind of super cool feature. But again, I'm not going to cover that today because you've got the basics of how it works and you can kind of just do that one yourself. Okay, so the last thing I said I was going to show you was the ability to use something like ESBuild to be able to do hot reloading on your applications as well. And to be able to do that, there's a tool called ESBuild Register, which is a super cool plugin, which basically allows you to do on-the-fly transpilation with ESBuild. So what I'm going to do very quickly is I'm going to bring back the application that we had earlier, which was the chris.ts. I'm just going to paste this in, so I'm not going to explain that as we have coded that already. So that is now back in our application. And then we're going to come back to the terminal. So we'll come back to the terminal. Let's just clear all of this. And then what we're going to do is install a package called ESBuild register. So we'll just do ESBuild register. And then we'll just save that as a dev dependency. So it'll take a few seconds to install that. So now that's installed, I'm just going to go into my source folder and I can just type in node -r ESBuild register, and then I can put in chris.ts, run that for a second, and you can see it has executed that code. So you, just do a more crystal TS. Very cool. It transpiles and then runs your code. So in this case, it's going to take that function echo and then it's going to execute that echo thread, and you can see it comes back with hello Fred. Okay, so that's super cool stuff, right? Just using ES-Build Register, we can transpile and run our application straight away. So what we're going to do now is, rather than using HTTP server, what we'll do is fire up an Express server really quickly, and then we will show you how that's going to work with the hot reloading. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to install Express. So we'll just do npm. I just need to go actually back up to our package directory, and we'll just type in npm install, and we'll install Express, and we'll install the types for Express because we want all of that good in telesense magic there, and then we're just going to save that to our dependencies. So that will install, so that's nice in there, and then we'll come back into our source folder for a second. Let's clear that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create that Express server in TypeScript rather than JavaScript. So we'll call it index.ts. So we'll have done that. And then what we'll do is import Express from Express. And then next thing we are going to do, let's semicolon terminate that. And then we will have our app. So we'll create our Express app here. So that is instantiated. And then we are, like the HTTP server that we used earlier when we were npxing, we will just do express.static, and we will take and expose whatever is in our public folder. So that's cool. So that will now serve up anything that is in that public folder there. And then what we're going to do is just listen on port 3000, and we will put a nice little arrow function in here, and we will just say that we are listening so that we know that our server is up and running. So that is our very simple Express server that is just going to listen on port 3000 and serve up whatever is in the public folder. So now if I go back into my terminal, you can see I've got my index.ts there. And now if I do a node -r and I put an ES-Build register, and then I put in index.ts, it will fire up my Express server. And now if I go to my Brave browser and type in localhost 3000, you can see it says hello ES-Build world. So our React application is now served up from our Express server. Now, as I said, if I make a change there, I don't have any hot reloading at the moment. So if I go and make a change in my Express server, let's say I go listening, whatever, then, you know, not going to do anything, right? There's no hot reload. But if I were to run that again, of course, it's going to come back up there. So let's just come back up a level to our root folder, and then we'll open up VS Code. And what we are going to do is take that very same command and we will modify our package JSON. So now what we can do is add the script start. And we can just literally paste in the command that we had before. Let's just add a comma over here, and that is going to start up our using ES-Build register. It's going to transpile, and then it's going to do all the bundling, etc. And it's going to start up that index.ts. So I just need to put source index.ts, and now if I come back to my terminal and type in npm start, our Express server is listening there. Now that doesn't give me the hot reload. Now of course I could use something like Chokidar, maybe I'll do another video on that at some point, but actually what I'm going to do is just put a simple nodemon around that. So to do that, all I need to do is install nodemon. So I will just do an npm install nodemon. We'll do a -- save. We'll put that as a dev dependency because we don't want that to go through for production builds or anything like that. That'll take a second to install. Let's just open up VS Code for a second again. And now what we're going to do is I'll just paste that in here for a second. But all I'm doing is for hot reloading, I'm going to have a script called dev. And I'm going to call nodemon --exec, and then I just pass in the string that I want it to be the start. So you can see very simply it's the exact same string as we had before, and then it's going to do a monitoring on any changes to TypeScript files. So that's what it's going to be watching, is TypeScript files, and when any change to any TypeScript files happen, then it's just going to recompile that. So if I just save that, and now if I come back into my terminal and we type in npm run dev, and that is now started up, and you can see it's watching that index.ts file, so that's cool. And now if I come back into VS Code for a second, and let's say I want to change something here, so rather than saying listening SDS, let's type in listening SDSY, we'll hit save. And then if I come back to my application there for a second, you can see it's restarted and it's now doing listening SDSY. And hot reloading is working, and of course it's gonna be super fast because ESBuild is super fast, right? So you don't want to be waiting that 2-3 seconds for TypeScript to do the compilation. And again, with large file systems, etc., and a lot of TypeScript files, that could take a much longer time. You want to run at that sort of ESBuild speed. So for doing hot reloads, it's a super useful tool. Again, I'm using NodeMod there for simplicity's sake. I think Chokidar is better, so I'll probably do a video at some point on usage of Chokidar. But there we go. That is the end of this video. It's been an action-packed video. So as I said, we've looked at ESBuild. You've got up and running. You can start using that today. You can use it for hot reloading. You can use it for transpilation, and then in the future you can use it for React 18 for that really fun server-side rendering. You can use it for React 17 server-side rendering today, but I think for these React server components it's going to be super cool, and we'll do another video on that. But anyway, I hope you love ESBuild as much as I do. I hope you have a lot of fun with it, and I hope you start to bring it into your own solutions, because I think it's super cool, and I really do think over time it's going to replace Webpack. So anyway, I hope this video has been useful, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks.